Look, the current COVID-19 pandemic coupled with the lockdown has brought the issue of basic income grant under the spotlight, especially with the unemployment numbers ever rising. As we look forward to tonight's State of the Nation address, we thought of unpacking this pressing issue by zeroing in on the poverty-inducing effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. How will COVID-19 drive temporary and long-term changes in poverty levels in South Africa? To tell us more, we're joined by Professor Ndangwa Noyoo, an associate professor at the Department of Social Development at the University of Cape Town. Professor, pleasure having you on the program.
Good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Now, great for you to take the opportunity. The State of the Nation address comes at a time, I guess, when South Africans are still grappling with these issues of poverty, issues of inequality, issues which are often exacerbated by high unemployment rates. And now, if that wasn't enough, compounded by a pandemic. To what degree has this pandemic exacerbated poverty, Professor?
Well, thank you very much for bringing that very important issue to the fore, because I think we have procrastinated for the last 26 years or so in making very bold and radical interventions in that arena. And one of the things that really, amplified and sharpened the grave inequalities in this country was not just the COVID-19 pandemic itself, but the inherited structural inequities and inequalities embedded in the social fabric and the economy of this country, which were not addressed radically and effectively throughout the decades. What transpired is that there were responses that were almost like a band-aid type of intervention. So we have 18 million people who are on the social assistance program of the government. Very important in that regard, because if you remove that safety net, then you will have difficulties in the country. But at the same time, how do you off-ramp those people, so to speak, from the social assistance program to more productive activities and making them capable citizens?
Right.
I think that that bridge was not really addressed. So COVID-19, yes, did just lay bare the inequalities and the inequities embedded in the social fabric and the socioeconomic system. Yeah. But we almost did not address these issues with a sense of urgency throughout the decades.
The social relief of distress grant, it has come in handy for people in such dire material need. You would agree many are still unable to meet their families' most basic needs. And I hear you when you talk about the long-term planning for such incidents. But what is the way forward with the immediate effects of the pandemic, and in particular such grants?
Very important point. I think also, and we tie this to the State of the Nation address, that the president needs and his cabinet need to begin to paint a post-COVID-19 scenario. What happens beyond the rollout of the vaccines? What happens beyond the relief? So immediately for me, the main issue would be to secure the livelihoods of the most vulnerable and the poor. So I would say that there is a need for a further relief interventions by the state as an immediate way of cushioning their lives, as a way of providing that post-COVID bridge, so that we're moving to a post-COVID global scenario.
For how long, though,
and
Professor?
Why is this?
What do you reckon when you assess the situation? For how long do you extend that?
These 6 months, 3 months type of interventions, for me, I don't think they work. And then it gets back to the question of the basic income grant as a citizenry entitlement. And for me, why it's important to bring in that kind of intervention is the whole notion of poor people being innovative, moving from just receiving the relief, receiving the grant, so to speak, but using them in a developmental way. So research and evidence has shown us that the poor and vulnerable peoples of South Africa have not been sitting on their laurels, so to speak, but they have used the meager or the minimal resources that were provided to them in a much more developmental way. When we go back to the objectives of the social assistance program, some of the developmental aspect is quite mute. And it was the citizens themselves who actually came up with these innovative strategies. So I would argue that a basic income grant at this point in time in a post-COVID scenario it must be at the forefront. And secondly, it also feeds into the notion of a failed system of capitalism. For a long time, we have worshipped at the altar of capitalism and thinking that capitalism is a panacea to the many challenges that were inherited from colonialism and apartheid. I beg to differ that the neoliberal agenda has failed to unlock the country and emancipate the mass of our people from the vestiges of colonialism and apartheid. How do we move forward? We move forward boldly and radically. And it is very effective in that way because we have got, how would we put it? We have got the evidence that's shown that once you go big, you will be able to lift the society in a particular way.
Right.
And also the interventions must then be linked to another type of intervention. And that's why I was mentioning in the in my early assertions that it's not just providing the relief to the poor, but being able to be critical enough and to think deeply to say, how do we then off-ramp these millions of people into productive activities? And one of the issues that can be done quickly is positive government procurement processes. For example, who says that the uniforms of prisoners, for example, should be sewn by companies? Why not have these women who receive or in receipt of the child support grant be given the startups and the capacities, and then you ring fence that procurement process and have these women, provide the uniforms across the country? That's just one way. Small agricultural enterprises as well. How do we have these people on this system linked to this new thrust that we're talking about, the land without compensation? How do you make that a developmental imperative? And that's how you do these things in a very bold and radical way, but with dividends that make the country move forward in a particular way.
Professor, we thank you very much indeed for your time. That's all the time we have for, but no doubt we'll bring you back, get a post-mortem, one would say, of the State of the Nation address. Thank you very much. God bless, be well.
Thank you so much for inviting